Okay, well, thank you everybody again for joining us for today's webinar. Today's session is entitled Beyond the Bachelor's, How to Apply to Graduate Programs. My name is Beverly Ann Waria. I use she, her pronouns. I serve as the Assistant Director in the Office of Admissions and Scholarships. More specifically, I recruit for two of our master's programs in higher education. So for those of you who are interested in applying to the Educational Counseling Program, otherwise known as the EC program, I will be the representative you most likely speak to, as well as the Post-Secondary Administration and Student Affairs Program, also known as PASA. But we have quite a few programs that are represented in the audience today. So what would help me out is that today's program is geared to those of you who are interested in the application process, most likely for a master's program, but we also open up this session to those applying to doctoral programs. So I'll be speaking relatively broadly since there are some commonalities with our various applications, and then there are also some differences. What would help me today is if in the chat you all could take a moment to just share which program at USC Ross Year you are considering. So we have our LMFT program that's represented today. Curious to see if there's anybody. We have some PASA representatives today. Is there anybody that's interested in EC? Yes, we have an EC representative. Education as a whole, MFT. All right, so we do have a mix of folks that are represented today. Are there any other programs that are not included in the chat so far that people are interested in applying to? We have a PASA applicant here. All right, well, that also gives you an idea of who is in the room today. So, oh, and then somebody from the TESOL program, so Teaching English as a Second Language. Fantastic. So again, I'm going to be speaking very broadly, but here's what to expect for our time today. So we have a lot of ground to cover. Today's session is going to be broken down into two separate sections. The first one is going to be for those of you who are exploring options. I saw somebody in the chat mention education, so you might actually just be looking at a few different programs. So the first portion of today's webinar is going to be focused on researching graduate programs to apply to. So some of you might be on the fence, maybe you're looking into the various options that we have. So we'll be talking about how to find potential grad programs and then how to get more information. So we'll be speaking more specifically about informational interviewing. The second part of today's webinar is going to be focused on the graduate application itself. So we'll be starting out talking about the application process as a whole. We'll talk more about admissions requirements, a general timeline, and then you'll leave today with an action plan on how you might plan your application process. So we'll go ahead and get started. So at the end of today's webinar, as a result of attending this session, you'll have a better idea on how to choose potential graduate programs. You'll be able to identify the components of a typical graduate application. And again, we are going to be speaking broadly since there are some nuances between the various programs. And then, like I mentioned, you'll be able to lead the session with a general action plan or a way that you can organize the various application components. So with that, we'll kick off this first portion of the session talking about exploring graduate programs. Some of you already might have a very strong idea of which program you want to apply to. Those of you who are maybe searching around or still on the fence, I like to say that before you do the research of grad school, you have to do the me search. So there is this introspective part of asking yourself a few questions and getting an idea of what particularly either interests you or what you're looking for. And this is before you even start looking at graduate programs. So we've broken this down into three separate areas. Of course, there might be other areas, but for the most part, you want to look at skills and interests, career goals, and then program offerings. So let's start with skills and interests. For those of you who are looking at potential programs, ask yourself, what are the things that either you like doing? So what are your own personal interests? And then also, what are the skills that you bring to the table? What are the skills that maybe fulfill you and that you are interested in? If you are interested in working in a college environment, then maybe you're not considering our school counseling program, which is focused in K through 12. The other side of that is maybe you know that you want to work with younger students. So maybe some of the programs that are focused in higher education don't make as much sense for you because your interest is in working with younger students in K through 12. So asking yourself, what are you interested? What excites you about working in education? And then skills. What skills do you bring to the table? For those of you who are maybe good listeners or you like having more one-on-one interactions, maybe you're considering some of our counseling programs, like our educational counseling program focused in higher education, our school counseling program focused in K through 12. Or maybe our MFT, Marriage and Family Therapy Program, which isn't counseling itself, but there is kind of that one-on-one client interaction, right? That will be different from those of you who want to go the admissions route and are maybe considering programs like our enrollment management and policy program. So getting an idea of your own personal skills and interests. And I think the other side of that, maybe something that folks don't necessarily consider a lot, are what are the gaps in my skills and interests? And part of that is connected to career goals, which is going to be our second point. You don't have to have an absolute firm idea of what you want to do, but it does help in terms of weeding out other potential programs. So is your career goal to work in community college or a four-year college or university? Is your goal working with elementary school students, high school students, middle school students? Are you more on the administrative route? Do you want to work more behind the scenes and not have so much direct student contact? Or is that something that's important to you? Is the direct student contact every day? So these types of career goals can help inform the types of roles that you're looking for, maybe the types of career tracks that you want to consider. And previously, I had also mentioned the gap in skills and interests. So if you do want to, if you do aspire to have a particular role, what are the skills that you need to get you to that role? And what are the skills offered in that graduate program that will help prepare you for that role? Right? And of course, how does that align with your interests? And that naturally feeds into the third area is program offerings. How did this program or how does this graduate track specifically prepare you to reach your career goals? Whether that's to be a high school counselor or to be an assistant dean of admissions one day, or to open up your own practice in working with couples in therapy sessions, right? So what are the specific program offerings? How does the curriculum feed into your career goals? How do either the capstone projects or thesis projects of your graduate program feed into your interests and skills and maybe the gap there in preparing you for your career? So all of these three areas will kind of interplay with each other. And even in my examples, you might be starting to pick up on how there's some overlap between them. But somewhere in the middle is going to be a potential graduate program that you look into. Now, you might have various preferences. There might be other priorities that you want to consider, things like location, things like networking and opening the door to a potential network or professional field that aren't necessarily captured here, but your graduate program or the programs that you're interested in applying to will sit somewhere in the middle. There might be more overlap with one area versus another. But in terms of other areas, we know that this isn't all that our students are looking for. So what else are you looking for when you're searching for a potential graduate program? This is not going to be an exhaustive list, but you might want to start off with academics and research, or maybe faculty mentoring. What are the areas of expertise for the faculty in the program that you're applying to? Does it align with your own career interests, goals, or the program offerings? And then academics and research. What are you learning in the program? We talk a lot here at USC Rossier about how we're mission driven at the school, and that we're very much focused on preparing leaders to achieve educational equity through practice, research, and policy. We hope that's something that resonates with you. That's something that you want to do as part of your career and part of your goals. So as you're looking at potential graduate programs, how does your own interest align with the academic and research that's being conducted either through that program or at that institution? Other things that you might want to consider are things like location. And then we all know that we're not going into grad school alone. So many of us have family to consider, whether that's children or dependents, or maybe you're a caregiver for elders in your family. There are other considerations, and even things like location. Are you bound to a certain area, or do you have some flexibility in where you're applying to grad school? The next thing is going to be health and wellness and arts and culture. So if you are not in the classroom, if you are not at work, how are you taking care of yourself? What fills your cup? What makes you whole? What gives you peace or stability? Or where do you find self-care? And then part of that is, how is either the institution or the grad program addressing that as well? This might be something that's very important to you, or might be kind of like the extra thing that you didn't consider, but the grad program is offering. But that might be something that is part of your search and part of what you're particularly looking for in a grad program. Of course, we're talking a lot about career goals, especially for those of you that are applying to our master's programs or professional programs, is how does this program help prepare you or help get you to meet your own career goals? And then just broadly, how does the program help prepare you to enter this new professional community, whether it's through networking opportunities, professional and career development, or maybe a space to meet with the rest of the academic community through conferences and annual meetings. I'll share that with USC Rossier, networking is a huge part of what comes with the USC experience. You might have heard of our Trojan Family Network, and that is very much true in terms of professional networking and career goals. We have a very broad network of alumni that have come through our programs, many of whom are looking to hire our Trojans once they graduate from the program. So as you are looking into grad programs, how is the network, how is the professional development helping you meet your career goals? And then of course, what does your support network look like as either part of that graduate program or part of that institution? So things like the graduate student organizations or clubs, and then diversity and inclusion. With USC Rossier, we actually have a graduate student network, which is the RSOC, so Rossier Student Organization Council. This acts as kind of the cross-program student organization. We saw in the chat earlier today, we have quite a few folks representing different graduate programs that are on this call. Same thing with the RSOC. It's a space for all of our different student organizations across our master's programs, across our doctoral programs, to collaborate with each other, to network with each other, and to support each other. And then diversity and inclusion is even baked into the work that we're doing here at USC Rossier. Our very mission as a school of education is focused on educational equity. So that's something that is very close to our hearts, and it's also woven throughout the student experience. Again, this is not a comprehensive list. There might be other things that are of importance to you, but this is just to get you thinking about what are the other types of things that I should be looking for as I am looking at different graduate programs. So as you're going through your search, you might want to ask yourself things like, what are my personal objectives for entering grad school? How does my program of interest support my career goals? Maybe you're asking yourself, does the mission of the program align with my own interests? Or how does the program actively support my objectives? Other examples of questions you're asking yourself, how does the program expand my network and my reach? What type of training am I looking for? And then what skills do I need to develop? Again, that could be something that comes out directly from the curriculum or the way that the graduate program is formatted. How is my career preparation included in the program? And then this is a fun one. Where do alumni of this program go after completing the program, and what do they do? That gives you an idea of the type of training that you might be getting in the program or potential career tracks or trajectories for you to either consider, or maybe it just re-emphasizes, yes, this is the program that I want to apply to. And as you're asking yourself these questions is important, the other part of that is tapping into your network and asking your network these questions. So I am here as a staff person. I'm here as a representative of USC Rossier. I have my own perspective, but of course my perspective is going to be different than students in the program or your fellow peers. It's going to be different than the professors and faculty in the program or mentors in the program. Alumni have a different perspective, and other campus connections like other staff or students who were in the program have since graduated and are now working at USC. All of these folks and more have different perspectives of the program that you're considering. So I very much encourage you to tap into that network and ask questions so that you can get a 360 view of what this program will look like. Because I have a very specific perspective, but if you speak to a student, I bet you they will have a wildly different perspective. Some of it may align, and then you might get additional information that isn't included on the website that the program isn't necessarily akin to, because this is part of the student experience. So as you are going through your search, I encourage you to consider conducting informational interviews. Now, informational interviews are interviews, and they're pretty much conversations with somebody that is either affiliated with something or is a content expert of something. For the purposes of this conversation, we'll say informational interviewing is for the purposes of applying to grad school and getting to know about your particular graduate program of interest. So step one of informational interviewing, you want to research the program and prepare questions. Some questions might be, or some answers might already be included on the website, but you want to get to know kind of the basics of the graduate program by doing your initial online research. And then you'll conduct the informational interview. These can be 20-minute phone or Zoom conversations. They can be 30 minutes of, let's go grab a coffee and, tell me more about your experience. It could be a 30-minute consultation appointment with one of our assistant directors, such as myself, who can share more about the logistics of applying to a graduate program. And then the third part, follow up and manage that relationship. So after you conduct your interview, express your gratitude, share your thanks. And then if it is a relationship that you want to manage, maybe it's with an alumni of the program. Maybe it's with a faculty of the program. You want to manage that relationship as needed. So I recommend that you first do your initial research. Like I mentioned, you want to do kind of the basic web search and get an idea of information that you can find online. so that you can use your conversation or your informational interview itself for much more nuanced questions. Things like, you know, if you're connecting with faculty, students, and alumni, maybe these are folks with similar career goals or are in the career that you aspire to be in. Maybe you're asking questions for insight about the admissions process. For our USC Rossier programs, we have student ambassadors. These are current students that are in the program and they're volunteering their time to share their experience with other folks that are applying or with other applicants. So maybe you're asking a student ambassador to provide insight on their admissions process and, you know, if they had any advice to give you or wish they had advice given to them. Maybe you're asking questions about campus and program support or their own experience with the program, whether that's alumni, current students, or faculty. And then this might also be the space for you to ask for advice or guidance from somebody that is more familiar with the process or the program. So informational interviews are a great way to learn more about the program. It also gives you an idea of how you can better prepare either yourself for starting the program or even applying and entering the program. Here are just a handful of additional examples for questions that might come up in an informational interview. You might ask somebody what is or what was their involvement with the program. You know, did they have an internship? Did they have a graduate assistantship? How did they secure that position? Were they involved with any extracurricular activities like clubs or organizations? You might ask them what influenced or motivated them to either pursue this field or apply to this graduate program. This is a great chance to get to know them a little better. How did the program help prepare them for what they're doing now? Maybe this is a question you ask an alumni of one of our programs. You can also ask what is the type of work that they do now? And then what challenges or trends are you seeing in the field? Because that can give you an idea of the future of the field, or maybe hot topics or current conversations that are happening within the graduate program or just within the field as a whole. And then lastly, what else or who else should I know? They might recommend you look into a certain scholarship. They might recommend that you read an article or a journal. They might recommend you to speak with somebody else that they can connect you to. So ask them, what else or who else should I know as I'm preparing my application to apply? So that's kind of wrapping up this first section of the webinar in this exploration process of learning more about graduate programs and getting to know about the program that you're interested in applying to. We're going to shift gears now and we'll talk more broadly about the application itself. I'll start off by saying that each one of our programs, each one of our master's programs and our doctoral programs hosts monthly webinar sessions. And this is a great way for you to get to know the specifics of the application for the program that you're applying to. So again, we have multiple programs that are represented here. So I'll speak broadly, but I encourage you to either attend one of those webinars or to get in touch with the assistant director for the program that you're applying to. We're all available for one-on-one consultation appointments, and we're happy to review the specific application steps for the program that you're applying to. But generally, for graduate applications, there's usually an online application and application fee. Now, by virtue of you all participating in today's webinar, you might be able to avail yourself of our application fee waiver. So I would say get in contact with the assistant director for your program. The very last slide will have our contact information, and let them know. I attended today's Beyond the Bachelor's webinar. I'm curious to see how I can get a fee waiver for the application, and we'll be happy to follow up with you. The next thing on the checklist is usually official transcripts from all post-secondary institutions that you have attended. Now, at USC, for USC Rossier, you're actually required to submit 2 official transcripts. The first set of official transcripts will be uploaded by you directly into the online application. So this tends to be an e-transcript, but you can also get a hard copy. But you're uploading the first set into the application itself. The second set of transcripts is going to be sent directly to USC Office of Graduate Admissions. And what I will do right now is I'll put a link in the chat to the address of where you are sending your transcripts. So 1 second, transcripts. So I put in the chat the link for how to send your transcripts in. So whether you're sending in an e-copy or an e-transcript, the email address is going to be included in that link. Or if you're sending a hard copy, the mailing address is also going to be in that link. So follow the instructions on that webpage to learn about how you'll be submitting your 2 copies. And keep in mind, that's from all post-secondary institutions that you've attended. So for those of you who are transfer students, if you've attended multiple institutions or you attended a community college before transferring to a 4-year college, you'll need to get 2 sets of your community college transcripts and then 2 sets of transcripts from your degree granting institution. The next thing is the personal statement, which is the main admissions essay. I'll get into more detail about that shortly. We also have the resume, 2 letters of recommendation, and then for international students who do not waive out of the English language proficiency requirement, you'll need to submit either a TOEFL or IELTS score. In addition, there may be program-specific application materials. So some of you might need to submit a writing assessment. There might be an interview as part of your application process. There might be a timed writing assessment or a video response. Again, we have multiple programs in this room right now. So just know that there may be program-specific application materials that I don't get into too much info today because we're speaking quite broadly about the various areas. Again, we do have fee waivers available. Contact the assistant director in charge of your program, but USC also offers several other types of graduate application fee waivers. So on the website or on the screen here, you'll see the website for USC graduate application fee waiver. So I would check here first. If you don't meet the requirements for this fee waiver, go ahead and get in touch with your program coordinator. For USC Rossier, we use a holistic review process or holistic admissions. So I'm going to be talking about multiple application components today, but just know that the admissions committee who is going to be reviewing your application will be weighing all things equally, right? We get lots of questions of, what is the minimum GPA? Are you looking for work experience? What happens if I didn't get a good grade in this class? Our admissions committee is going to look at all things evenly. So everything from your personal statement to the letters of recommendation, transcripts, program-specific materials, and then your experience or your potential in the field is what is going into the review process. No one area is going to be weighed any more heavily than the other. They're all equally looked at. So quote unquote bad GPA isn't necessarily make or break. We're still looking at all of the application components. And then we're also looking at, how do you incorporate what our mission is here at USC Rossier to the type of work you're either doing now or want to do in the future. So know that the review process for graduate applications is this holistic review process. The next area is related to transcripts. This is a question that we get all the time is, what GPA do I need? So for USC Ross Year, there is no minimum GPA required to apply to USC Ross Year programs. Competitive applicants tend to have 3.0 average GPAs, but we're still looking at applicants who have under 3.0 GPAs. Just like the previous slide mentioned, it's a holistic review process. So if if your GPA is under 3.0, we will still review it. We may be looking at things like your letter of recommendation or your personal statement, other areas to give us more of a sense of what you're contributing to the program. And there is also an optional essay, which I'll talk about a little later, where you can provide additional context if you feel like that's needed. Speaking of admissions essays, we have 3 buckets of main admissions essays. The first one is going to be the personal statement. Now, the personal statement is going to be the main admissions essay. And usually there is going to be a prompt that your specific program will ask you to address in your personal statement or in your admission essay. Generally, the themes tend to be around what motivated you to apply to the program, what prepares you to apply to this program. So it could be your experiences or your professional or volunteer work. And then what are your professional goals that relate to the pursuit of this degree? There may be a very specific prompt for the program that you're applying to, but generally personal statements are following these types of themes. We want to know what prepares you for this program, what motivates you to apply to this program, what are you hoping to do after this program? How does this program help you meet your career goals or your personal goals? The next type of admissions essay may be different depending on the program that you apply to. Some of you might have a short answer essay as part of your application process. Some of you might have a timed writing assignment. So for that, I would suggest to review the USC Ross Year mission statement, and then to reflect on your own career goals and consider how do those experiences show either leadership, service, advocacy. How does that also align with the USC Ross Year mission statement? And then lastly, we have an optional essay. So I say there are 3 essays, you might actually just have 2, but there is space for you to provide additional context to the admissions committee that might not be addressed elsewhere on your application. So this is maybe context that has impacted your academic or career trajectory. And an optional essay is just that, it is optional. So don't feel obligated to write something in this section. You'll have maximum 250 words if you do want to use this space to share any additional information. So one of the examples that I usually give for this is maybe you have a very strong academic track record, but lo and behold, there is one semester where you got really bad grades. Maybe this optional essay is the space for you to provide context to what happened. Maybe you got sick. Maybe you had to take a leave of absence to help somebody in your family, whatever the case may be. If you are going to be talking about a challenge in the optional essay, my tip is that you talk about that challenge, you specifically address how did you address that challenge, and then what is the outcome of that. So in my example, maybe you got really bad grades, but you addressed that by doing extra credit work. Maybe you retook the class. Maybe you went to additional office hours to talk to the professor more. So there was some action on your part. And then what is the outcome? So the outcome of that is maybe when you retook the class, you got a stronger grade after, or maybe the professor saw how much work you were putting into your extra assignments and changed your grade. Whatever the case may be. Mention the context, your action, and then what is the result of that. So again, that is what the optional essay is. A tip, whatever, if you are writing something that is multiple drafts. A tip that I have is to write your first draft, and then once you're done, reread the essay prompt. So this is specifically for the personal statement. This could also apply to something like the short answer. But sometimes as we are writing, we tend to go off on different tangents. So after you complete your first draft, let it rest for a bit and then go back, reread it. Does it answer the questions that are included in the prompt for that essay? If not, you need to go back and kind of do some editing there. I had a mentor tell me that good writers know how to write, great writers know how to edit. So that might be something that you apply in this case. Additional essay writing tips: highlight what makes you unique and what distinct perspective you bring to your graduate program and or your future profession. So for many of our programs, there aren't things like prerequisites. So, maybe for some of you who are taking a related major, how does your major inform the program in which you're applying to? Or for those of you who had professional work, or maybe you were student staff as an undergraduate, how do those experiences inform your application and candidacy to this program? Generally, if you are writing multiple essays, all of your essays should tell a coherent story in that your past experiences have led you to this graduate program. So whether that is your major, your classes, your work experience, your volunteer experience, your undergraduate experience, all of these will inform why you are applying to this program. And it'll be up to you as the applicant to help us connect those dots. And then, of course, essays should make sense read in any order, so they should be able to stand alone, if they're read first, read last, whatever the case may be. The resume, I won't get into too much detail, but generally, of course, the resume is going to be the area where you outline your professional, your volunteer, and your education experience. Now, there are many trains of thought as to whether 1 page or 2 pages are best. I will leave that to you and your career center to discuss. So a question that we commonly get is, I have a resume. Can you review it for me before I submit it for the program? Our staff technically aren't really trained to do that. We might be able to provide you advice, but for the most part, we want to give you the space to connect with your career center at your institution. For those of you who are still at an institution or are undergraduates, for those of you who have graduated, this will be a great chance to see what does your alumni benefits come with. Do you have access to the Career Center? Is there an alumni coordinator that can provide you feedback as you are preparing to hit the job market? But generally for the resume, you're highlighting relevant research or professional experience, and you want to use impactful language. What is the result of you having this task? With a specific position? What are the skills that you're taking away from doing the task and responsibilities at your job, your work, or volunteer work? Generally, resumes are going to be recommended for applications to professional and master's programs. For those of you who might be considering applying to our doctoral programs, more than likely you'll be submitting a CV or curriculum vitae, which is a lengthier, more detailed resume that tends to include more things like teaching experience and research experience. But I know many of the folks on this call today are applying to master's programs, so you will be submitting resumes to your program. The next area is going to be letters of recommendation. Now, this is something that I get questions about all the time, so we'll spend some time talking about letters of recommendation. For the USC Rossier application, 2 letters are typically required. If you're looking at other institutions, they might have 3 letters that are typically required, because the third one tends to be like this tiebreaker one, just in case there are differing opinions. But for letters of recommendation, ideally, you want to identify recommenders that can really speak to your strengths, whether it's your intellect, your preparation for the program, or maybe characteristics of a strong for effective grad students. So things like persistence or readiness for grad school. You also want to consider the strength of the recommendation and give recommenders plenty of notice. One big tip that I have is, students ask me, who am I asking? Like, do I ask somebody who has a really high title or somebody who maybe knows me a little better and doesn't have as lofty as a title? My personal recommendation is that you never ask for a letter of recommendation. You ask for a strong letter of recommendation and you explicitly state it as such. So whether you're asking somebody with a lofty title or somebody that knows you really well, you want to make sure that the strongest people who can speak on your behalf are going to be able to do so in your recommendation. They're going to be going to bat for you. So if it's a really lofty title but they don't know you as well, that's going to come across in your letter of recommendation. If they kind of know you, you might want to reconsider and ask somebody who knows you a little better, even if the title is different. So I would consider who can really speak to your strengths. Because as an applicant, think about it, you have just a few opportunities to talk about yourself. You get to talk about yourself in your personal statement, in your optional essay, and then your letters of recommendation, your recommendation writers. These are two other voices. So do you want a really strong person to speak on your behalf or somebody who kind of knows you? Maybe you took a class with them, maybe you got an A. Great, but do they know you, right? If the admissions committee did not read your admissions essays at all, can you rely on your recommenders to get you into this program? Can they speak on your behalf? So something to consider for your letters of recommendation. You want to be strategic about who you are asking. So ideally, we're asking for two letters, one from an academic setting and one from a professional setting, because that is giving the admissions committee two different pieces of information. Who are you as an incoming graduate student to this program? Who are you as a professional or a future professional in this field, right? A professor might not necessarily know, if you're interested in counseling. Maybe they don't really know that side of you, which is fine. You want to balance that out with somebody that is able to speak to that if you're applying to a counseling program, for example, right? So you want to be strategic in who you're asking. Now, I know there are those of you who are maybe a few years removed from your undergraduate experience and you say, oh, it's been a few years. I don't know if the professors still remember it. That's fine. You can still submit two letters. Both of those can be a professional setting. The other side of that, I know there are those of you in the audience who are undergrads right now. You're like, I've never really had a full-time job. I don't have career experience. That's fine too. You can submit two letters to an academic setting. I'll also throw out, maybe you have a student position or a student job. Maybe you had volunteer work, right? Something outside of academics that still inform how you might be moving forward with your career field. So be strategic in who you're asking and then help them help you, right? They are taking time out of their day to write a letter of recommendation. You want to nudge them along the process. So for some recommenders, they might be able to just write a letter without any additional prompts. Other folks, they might benefit from things like a first draft of your personal statement or your admissions essay, so they can really get to know what is your perspective of applying to this program, what is your motivation, and they can read that in your first draft. Some other folks, they might need something to jog their memory, like transcripts or maybe a copy of a paper that you wrote in their class. Maybe you're also attaching your resume. So what are the materials that you can provide to your recommender that can help really shine what they are going to be talking about for you? And don't be afraid to assign talking points. If you're talking to a professor and they know you really well, you might say, I did really well in your class. I really would appreciate if you focus on X, Y, and Z in your letter of recommendation for me, right? So that way you can assign different talking points to your other recommendations. So they're not necessarily overlapping, right? These are two different voices. So you want to maximize how many wonderful things people are talking about. If they're saying the same exact things, you've kind of lost an opportunity to share more perspective about who you are as a person, as an applicant, as a student. And then as a tip, make sure to thank your recommender, keep them updated, let them know which programs you get into, because they're investing time into preparing this application for you. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the example of application deadlines. So multiple programs here. We have just a couple of examples. At USC Rossier, we have application deadlines in various rounds. So usually programs will have 1, 2, or 3 rounds of applications. Some have 4. The examples on your screen are the PASA program and the EC program. So the very earliest you can apply, our first application deadline is going to be November 1st for these programs. And then the second application deadline is January 15th. If you miss both of those, there's still an opportunity to apply in March and April. But I will say across the board, priority deadline for scholarship consideration is only for students who apply in round 1 and round 2 of the application process. We have limited scholarships available. We have more money available in round 1. So if scholarships is important to you, apply sooner rather than later. We'll still have scholarship funding available in round 2, but it tends to be less because we've already awarded funding to round 1 applicants. So if you want to put yourself in a good position, the earlier the better. Apply by either round 1 or round 2. Typically by round 3 and round 4, that funding is already gone. So apply early to the program deadlines and then check with your specific program for the timeline for those programs. As we start to wrap up, I'll just kind of quickly go through creating an action plan. So as you've seen today, there are multiple components of the graduate application. So you want to create a timeline to get yourself organized to go through the application process. Maybe you're old school and you want to do pen and paper. Maybe you are better with online mobile apps or various websites that help you create a to-do list or a task list. Whatever the case may be, you create a to-do list, including any important deadlines, and we're going to use those deadlines as a way to stay on track and keep us organized. So here's an example. Backwards planning. So ideally, you're going to start with the application due date. That is going to be the hard deadline because that is the last day that you can submit your application. So keep in mind, this is an example. So we're going to start with our application due date and we're going to work backwards. Ideally, we suggest that you have an internal deadline so that you give yourself buffer room before the actual deadline. This is going to be a soft deadline, so if there's anything last minute that you need to do, maybe you just want to bypass all of the website traffic that we get on our deadline dates, whatever the case may be, you want to set an internal due date, a soft deadline. Our tip for letters of recommendation is usually you ask your recommenders 6 weeks ahead of the deadline. This may vary. Maybe you have different timelines with your recommenders. 6 weeks tends to be a good spot. And then for your personal statement, if this is something that you are providing to the recommender, you want to build this into your timeline too. So let's pretend you want to apply by round 1. Round 1 application deadline is usually November 1st. Let's say you want to give yourself a soft deadline. So a few days ahead, maybe you say to yourself, okay, the deadline is November 1st, but I will submit my application a few days ahead and I'm going to submit it on Wednesday, October 26th. So working with this deadline, if you are asking your recommendation writer 6 weeks ahead, that means you're requesting no later than yesterday, September 20th, right? Now, this gets a little squished, but you can definitely ask with 5 weeks of notice, with 4 weeks of notice, but that's something that you want to build into your personal timeline. That's another reason that personal deadlines are really helpful. And if you're providing your first draft to the person writing your recommendation letter, I'm a really slow writer, so I need a lot of time. So maybe I start my first draft in early August. or maybe I'm able to get it done in a weekend, and maybe I ask, mid-September, my recommender, and I already have my draft then. But this gives you an idea of how to use things like deadlines and backwards planning to your benefit so that you can help organize the various components of your application. So this is just an example. You also have to include things like your resume, if you're including your, if you're conducting informational interviews, how does that fit in to your own personal timeline? So again, this is just an example of how you might be able to organize yourself as you're preparing for the application. Final tips. Now's the time to be perfectionist. Make sure you proofread, ensure that your name is correct on all of your documents. We are really hopeful that you're applying to USC, but you might also be looking at other programs, which we know. Make sure the right school, the right faculty name, the right recommenders are uploaded for the correct application. Make sure that you are answering the prompt, that you're staying within the limits, whether it's word length or formatting requirements. Are you submitting the correct supplemental materials for your programs? And then proofread, make sure all of the correct information is there and that you're really saying what you want in this application. So maximizing your time before grad school, this is the time to start growing your professional network, developing relationships with mentors, or conducting your research and identifying which programs are a good fit. For those of you who do want access to today's recording or the slides from today's presentation, feel free to scan the QR code. This will lead you to a link to the webinar evaluation, and then I'm happy to follow up with you directly. This will also give us more information about information that is included in these webinars and what might be more helpful to you as you're preparing your application. I mentioned that each of the programs has an admissions representative. So here are the various programs and the person that you will be following up with. So for those of you that are applying to either PASA or the EC program, I will be your contact, but my colleague Kala is a contact for Master of Arts in Teaching or the MAT TESOL program. My colleague Esteban will be the point of contact for the EDL program, and then Heidi is the contact for the MFT and LDT programs. So lots of information that just came your way. We have just a couple of minutes left, but I'll pause now to see if there are any questions from the information from today's session. Feel free to include in the chat, or if you'd like to raise your hand, we can take a couple of questions. What is the ideal length for personal statements? Great question. I believe there is a word limit, and it escapes me how much that word limit is. I think it's 500 words for the personal statements, but that should be included in the prompt for the program. So keep in mind, each of these programs has a different prompt. So I think it's 500, but we have so many programs that it might vary. So double check with the prompt in the application itself. And ideally, you don't want to exceed that length, because the admissions committee is also checking, is this person following directions? Any other questions? What are reviewers looking for in the timed writing assessment? Good question. Again, the timed writing assessment isn't applicable to everybody. So some applicants will need to do a 30-minute timed writing assessment, which is in the application itself. You can do it anytime during the application. And generally, 2 tips. Read our personal statement for the USC Rossier School of Education, our mission statement, and then read your own personal statement. Start thinking about how those 2 connect. How does the mission statement inform your decision to apply to the program? And how does what you want to do either during the program or after you graduate align with the work of USC Rossier and what we as a school are committed to doing? Fantastic. Glad I was able to answer that. Any additional questions today? All right. Thank you all for taking time out of your Wednesday afternoon and or morning to join us. Again, we hope to see you at a future event. For those of you actually who are in the Los Angeles area, we're hosting an in-person mixer for all applicants to our Rossier programs. Thursday, October 6th, here at the USC campus from 6 to 8 p.m. Great opportunity to do some of that networking or informational interviewing. We are inviting our applicants as well as our current students, our faculty, our staff, our student ambassadors, and alumni to the program. So great opportunity to network. More information are on our events page on the USC Rossier website. I hope to see you there or at a future webinar. Until then, stay safe, take care, and fight on. Hope to see you all soon.